Hey, folks, this clip is brought to you by Farm Bureau Health Plans. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ. That is Farm Bureau Health Plans. Tons of five-star players that were at that game on Saturday. And, they all of the reports that you heard was that they had a good time. I mean, of course, Tennessee is going to show them the best time they can. But what Tennessee cannot control, or well, they can control it to whatever extent they can control it. But what they didn't get done was a win on Saturday. But not just that, they got run off the field in their own building in front of all these recruits and a bunch of recruits who you are also competing with Georgia for. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them. And I'll just first throw it to you, Zach. Do you think that it's gonna have a negative effect on recruiting? Not just the Tennessee went 8-4. I mean, that's not a terrible season, as we've been saying, but the way that you've lost these games, maybe.
I mean, it can't be good. It's not a positive. It's hard to,
Sure.
it forces the coaching staff to recruit a little harder. Their sales pitch has to be a little better. Their relationship has to be a little better. Kirby Smart's a good recruiter. Nick Saban, all these guys that are landing top talent. It's hard enough to go up against them, just how good they are out on the recruiting trail, let alone when they can promise championships, especially Kirby. I mean, they haven't lost a game since 2021. If you're going up against Georgia for a 5-star recruit, I don't care if he's an in-state kid or not. Like, that kid wants to get to the NFL. He wants to win a national championship in college, which the type of players you should be going after. That's what they should want to do. It's hard to fault Tennessee for not getting one of those guys over Georgia. Like, they just can't offer that at this point. So it's still got to be this slow build where you win a couple of these because your relationship is so good and a kid believes in your vision and they want to come there. But I do think it makes it more difficult. You can sell the future a lot. You can sell what you did last season. Kirby can say, look, it was a fluke. They've only done it once in the last 15 years. Look at what they did this season, the year after. Look at what we did. Everybody was kind of saying we might be a little bit weaker to start this season, and now they look like the best team in the country the last month of the year. I mean, it's hard to go up against. I mean, even Alabama kind of recovered after a little rocky start in the loss to Texas. They're in line to maybe make the playoff. It's really hard. It's really hard. And everything that Alabama game did last season for recruiting, it's got to be the opposite of that a little bit when you go and lose that bad at home to a team that might also want you to come play there. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a little too negative, but I think it's realistic. Like, if you're a recruit and you're 17, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer where you would want to go.
I mean, last year we had multiple segments on the show after the LSU game, after the Alabama game, where we talked about what kind of a direct impact those wins have on your recruiting. I think legitimately, I think there are guys that Tennessee won over at that Alabama game. Like, because of that Alabama game. Big recruits. Because it shocked the world, but just the atmosphere and how incredible that game was, and just how you can get caught up in it and all of those things. And guys start changing their minds because they go like, whoa, this can be me. This is what I want to play in front of and all that stuff. And I don't think, conversely, I don't think this is as bad as that Alabama game was good, if that makes sense. But it's not good. It's definitely not good. And you got to stop doing it. Like, there is just such a big difference between, beating Missouri and then going in and being legitimately competitive, but losing to Georgia. Between that and getting killed by both of them and looking particularly non-competitive against Georgia, where it was so clear what kind of talent gap there was there, where they just dominated you. I think a recruit can parse that between Missouri and Tennessee, the talent is comparable, and Tennessee just had a terrible game. It's kind of two different things. Yeah. There's having a terrible game like Tennessee at South Carolina last year, and just getting dominated by a team that has a ton of 5 stars on the roster. And Man, it's not good. But here's where I can provide a little bit of hope. Tennessee has as good, if not better, resources than essentially every program in America. Farm Bureau Health Plans has been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years, and much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200 plus locations across the state of Tennessee. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ, Farm Bureau Health Plans. And so that's nice. You have just as big a donors as anybody else. You have all of the resources that you need. The facilities are top notch. It seems like you got good recruiters on this roster, but you got to stop doing this. You cannot do that and think that this isn't going to affect recruiting. And I don't think that they think that. I don't think Josh Heupel thinks that. But like, man, it's not good. Let's keep that to a minimum. So that we don't have to worry about it. But let's also open up that checkbook, boys, and get some of these kids to Knoxville, no matter what happened this season.
That's part of it. But even with the NIL stuff, and I know this is kind of speculative and maybe people will disagree, but it feels like Georgia gets the guys that all they care about is winning a national championship. Like the money's there, they're going to take it, and they probably will, use that to get more money from whoever. I know that, but there's just a difference in that late in the fourth quarter, those Brew McCoy types, those Jawan Jennings types. Like you've got to have a lot of those guys on your roster to go undefeated throughout an entire season when there's tough games on the road. Like those are the types of guys that carry you. Tennessee hasn't had enough of those guys. Georgia does, and that's what Kirby goes after. He gets those guys, and they're the fastest and the biggest, and they have that mentality. And until you start loading up, and there's only so many of those. Like they're just not all out there. I mean, there's only so many of those in each recruiting class. Until you start getting those guys to come to Tennessee, getting those guys that are going to be playing on Sundays, a lot of those guys, it's just like this thing's not going to flip. So, it's going to be a slow build to this national championship deal if Heupel can get there. There is no just overnight. So I know people don't like the patience deal. You got to have patience when it comes to going like a 14-1 season. Like 10-win seasons should be the expectation now moving forward. But you got to stack some of those. Georgia did it for years before Kirby showed up and kind of made it easy for him to kind of transition into this dominant program. Heupel hasn't had that. He's got to do that before he can't skip that step. Like you have to do that before you can get to where Georgia's at. It's just the reality.
I think Trammell and Billy Bob right here, they bring up good points. When you start talking about having to just throw money at the problem, and where you don't have, the championship wins to draw kids into the door. Trammell said, I said it when it first started. My main concern was kids coming from nothing, getting offered money that they've never seen before. And Billy Bob said, we have to play our best players and keep it all business.
Yeah.
And in that saying, like, don't do what Butch Jones did and promise kids the moon. And then when they get here, you're like, well, actually, what if we didn't do all of that stuff that I promised you? And then they feel betrayed. And there's all of this stuff. And or if you let a diva come in and run over your program and be a problem in the locker room, there's tons of problems that can come along with that when kids are coming for money and not just for ball games.
NIL is a tool that you have to use right now, but look at Texas A&M. You can't just throw money at the problem and it solve everything. That's not gonna help you surge past Georgia. It has to be something you utilize and use, and it needs to be a strong part of your program. But it's not, it's not a magic fix.
It's not. And there's even this element too. Mark says, "Will Brew be back next year?" You can have those minimum at dudes, some NIL at dudes who you want to stay.
Like Cooper Mays would be, he should have a blank check, probably.
Pay that man, because boy, howdy, are you going to need him next year. Good Lord. I think you will have much more depth next season, especially if you can dip into the transfer portal again. You will have more depth on the offensive line next season, and especially if you can get Jordan Seaton from this recruiting cycle. But man, yeah, you're gonna have to pay up for some of those boys too to stick around at Tennessee, and you maybe hope that Cooper wants to keep building his NFL resume or whatever, and he comes back without needing a blank check. But who knows? That's another factor too.